Welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd, and we're glad you could join us for another great hour of answering your gardening questions. As always, I'm joined on the panel tonight by our experts from Nebraska Extension and University Landscape Services. Insect questions, Jim Kalish.
Good evening, everybody.
Turf and no weeds, Bill Kreuzer.
Hello, everyone.
We have Rots and Spots, Lauren Giesler.
Always great to be here, Kim.
And landscape questions, Jeff Culbertson.
Glad to be here, Kim.
You know, our master gardeners are also standing by to help you with your questions. You can just dial 402-472-1212 if you live in Lincoln. Our toll-free number is 800-676-5446. We also take your questions by email for future shows. That address is byf@unl.edu. When you send us a question, give us as much information as you can, including where you live. Attach those pictures as a JPEG or a PNG, please. You can also follow Backyard Farmer during the week on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, and Pinterest, and all that good social media stuff. Before we get to your questions, let's look at samples, and I want some.
You can have them.
Okay, excellent.
We got so many of them.
Perfect.
But what are they?
Exactly.
Well, I wanted to show you tonight that I think a lot of us have seen Cecropia moths and Polyphemus moths already, at least in the southeast part of the state. But likely they'll still be flying in the northern part of Nebraska and also the western part of Nebraska. So Polyphemus moths are really cool. And this is an example of a male here, and they can be tan, a little bit of greenish tan, and they have those distinctive eye spots on them, but just a wonderful sight to see. So they themselves don't feed on anything, but they do deposit eggs, and I have dogwood here. These are tiny little caterpillars here that just hatched maybe, I think about a week and a half ago. And I hope you can see them because, you know, most insects are really cute when they're young, even pest insects. But as they get larger, like these will continue to grow through the season, and they'll get as large as my thumb. And they're really attractive, and they're not considered harmful because they don't, you know, cluster together and completely defoliate any kind of a valued tree or anything like that. Plus, they mix it up a little, different kinds of trees that they feed on. So just wanted to show you what they look like when they're young, and you can expect 2 generations usually in Nebraska throughout the season. And so when you see them, you know, just kind of keep an eye on them and watch them grow and eat and eat and eat and eat and grow. So until they hit the autumn, and then there'll be a capsule-like cocoon, but Polyphemus caterpillars.
Love it. Thanks, Jim. Bill, this is not turf.
Not turf. And as many of you probably know, I'm not a big proponent of pesticides, especially when they're not required. But you know, I think there's been a lot of misinformation sometimes about the safety of different products. Some things are more dangerous than other products. And so what I wanted to show today was a couple things you might find in your household, and just highlight that although we don't call these pesticides traditionally, they can also be risky because they're still controlling a pest just in our house, and we can get them at a store, a grocery store, something like that. But it doesn't mean that it's safer if used incorrectly. But if it's used correctly, you know, then the safety can be there. So we have something like bleach, which, you know, is typical, you know, kills things as we use it to disinfect. And so, you know, when someone calls and says, "Can I kill a grass weed with bleach?" Well, you probably can, but that's illegal, and that's not what we recommend. And it's something that can be kind of dangerous when using it correctly. Mothballs, another thing that you know, can be around our house, is known to be carcinogenic and can be causing a lot of problems with people's health. And then we have things that we put on our bodies that are medicines, and a medicine that's still controlling a pest is a pesticide. We just call a medicine. So we have things like athlete's foot cream that kills that's a fungicide or fungistat that slows the growth of a fungus. It's like we put on our rots and our spots. And then we have something here, you know, you put on your kids for lice, and that's permethrin, which you may have heard, you know, talked about on this show occasionally to kill other insects in the landscape. So I'm not saying that these are safe and the pesticides are safe. I'm saying that if we use these properly, the degree of safety is much higher and the risk is much lower. So let's make sure we read these labels and know what we're putting down in the landscape, in our house, or on our bodies.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thanks, Bill. Okay, Lauren, what's the rot or the spot?
Well, there's a lot of different diseases that we can have on pine trees. And so tonight I just brought along one that we're right in the window. This is actually a good one where you can see the long needles and you can see the banding on the needles where you have the brown tips and then the real dark line at the base. And you would see this typically on trees where you'd get, just little patches of needles that look like this, or just, even individual needles scattered in different portions of the tree. You wouldn't see it on the whole side of the tree because you can see injury like that can be even winter injury, although it usually lacks that distinct band. But if you see this is Dothostroma needle blight. Right now, over the next week, is the perfect time to really start treatment for this. And it's something that you can manage fairly easily. The other things you can do to try to control this would be eliminate any irrigation sprinkling over those lower branches. A lot of times that's where you see it on these trees. And then you can make those applications to try to manage it if you're using something like Mancozeb or many of the Bordeaux mixers or copper types of products do a nice job. And we have a neb guide online that talks more about it.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Lauren. Okay, Jeff, some beauty.
Yeah. A couple different things I brought in tonight. The first one we'll look at is the one with the white flowers here, and that's mock orange. And so mock orange, typically we think of it as a very large shrub. And, it has its season. It's kind of in there with the beauty bush and the forsythia and some of those that have kind of a limited season, and then after that are kind of a large green shrub. And this is one of them that can get quite large. There's some newer varieties out there that are more compact and a little easier to manage. But what's nice right now, it's in full bloom, it smells nice, it has large arching branches, so it's very attractive. And it's the ones I cut this off of are about 7 foot tall right now. And then the one with the pink leaves here is tricolor beech, so that's a European beech. And the tricolor, it's unusual. It's actually one of my favorite small trees. It does fairly well here. It's a tree that I would use on for an eastern exposure. You don't want it to be necessarily getting a lot of southern or western sunlight. But in a location with good soils, they do very well. They don't grow very quickly, so it stays kind of relatively small. And does well every year. Every year it puts on quite the show with its leaf color, so it's a lot of fun.
Yes, it is, and people think it's flowering pink in the middle of the summer.
Yeah.
That's the foliage.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. And no, Western Nebraska people, you cannot use this one. All right, you get the first picture, Jim, and this is a Corning, Iowa viewer. She has gooseberry bushes, and she has these on her gooseberries, and she wonders what they are and how she can get rid of them.
Okay, yeah. Those are called gooseberry sawflies, also called imported currant worm because they tend to infest currants and gooseberries, those related plants. And as a sawfly, they're more related to a wasp than they are a caterpillar or a moth or butterfly. They're very easy to control with either picking off or spraying with an insecticidal soap or very light, you could use even pyrethrins to take care of them. Something like that, very easy to do. And there's only one generation. Now, sometimes there's a second generation that starts, but this is the big whammy, the first generation. So whatever you do now to take care of it, then you very not likely will have any more problems afterwards. So really important to take care of because the defoliation can depress the size of the fruit.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Jim. Bill, this is actually an application question with something got applied to this turf, and we're not entirely sure what it was. They watered a lot. They think the rain helped. He thinks it's nitrogen burn and then wonders whether he replaces the top 2 to 3 inches of soil and resods, or what should he do exactly?
I'm very confident that that's not nitrogen burn. That looks like a big application of either a non-selective herbicide, way too high of a rate of some kind of selective herbicide. I would, I don't know if you made the application yourself or if you had someone make it for you. I would really look into this. This is, a pretty bad mistake. And the reason I don't think it's a fertilizer issue is because the area you can kind of see they miss from the tree to the sidewalk. If it was fertilizer, that area would be actually growing like crazy right now if it survived the salt damage, and it's not. It just looks like it's growing normally. So it really points the finger to a herbicide issue. And if you have an issue with it now, the damage is probably done. It's hard to say if they put down a pre with that and you're going to seed into it, you're not going to have any success. You're going to need the sod. I wouldn't go out stripping out, top couple inches of soil. That's a lot of soil. You might want to, maybe till it and then sod into it to help break up any pre-residual that may be there, and hopefully those sod roots will move down into that soil.
All right, thank you, Bill. All right, Lauren, we had this issue with lilacs last year, and this is the first one we've seen this year. We're not sure where this viewer is from, but the ends and the leaves are this funny brown and then blackish sort of stuff happening already.
Yeah, and it looks just like when we see fire blight, in a apple tree, for example. So, and it's very similar. This is a bacterial infection that goes in. It's actually a Pseudomonas that does this, just like a different organism than fire blight, but similar type of effect. And what you can do is just go in and cut those tips off, go down 7 to 10 inches below the affected area, just to eliminate the inoculum, and then hopefully you can clean it up that way and just kind of watch it, and I would just use sanitation.
All right, and can they expect it every year if they've had it?
They sure could, and especially if they do not remove that, that's going to serve as inoculum or seeds for disease in future years. So anytime you get really wet conditions, that could keep going.
All right, okay, Jeff, so this is the handful of hail, the gang was all here. And we have one viewer sent a before, this is an Omaha viewer, and then the after. And of course, the question from everybody is, what can we do about hail damaged plants?
Well, there's a couple easy answers. I mean, one is try to relax. And our yard where I live was hit pretty hard by hail, so a lot of our perennials were chewed up pretty badly from that as well. So I think if you have an area where you have, let's say we'll use hosta as an example, with just holes in the leaves, just leave it alone. If the leaves are generally there and they just have a few holes in them, let's not get worried right now. Let's leave them alone, make sure we're doing good management with them. Make sure they're not getting too much water, make sure that there's the proper amount of mulch, they have good growing conditions, and watch them throughout the year. And they will probably start forcing new leaves as we go through the summer here. And it probably won't affect flowering. For those, like me, where there's nothing left but kind of the rib of the hosta, what I'll do is I'll go in this weekend and cut it, so I'll get rid of that shattered tip. So if you have plants, I also have butter burr that was stripped down, so I'm going to do the same thing with that. So I want to make nice clean cuts so we don't have disease issues with these shattered ends of the perennials, and clean those up. And then again, in 4 to 6 weeks, I would expect, with good growing conditions and really the weather looks pretty good, we'll probably start seeing these things recover. So.
All right, we just kind of have to hope.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, Farmer McGregor isn't the only one with a wascally wabbit problem. If you garden, sooner or later you're going to have to come up with a strategy to keep those furry friends from ruining all of your hard work. For our first feature tonight, we have our critter creature Dennis Ferraro giving us tips to keep the rabbits out of the garden.
We're going to talk about rabbits. Rabbits are very prolific. They're all over the landscape. They start mating in April, and they have young all the way through October. Now, the young ones like young, luscious plants, like our fruit vegetables growing up. And the older ones, as they get older, love to girdle trees and eat anything that we want in our garden or our landscape. So it's very important to keep rabbit damage to a minimum, because they can do a lot of damage. How do you recognize damage from rabbits? One, you see those small pellets, those round pellets of their scat around your area. Also, when they chew things, it's usually at a 45-degree angle and fairly low to the ground. And their teeth marks on a tree are going to be about a 1/4 inch wide versus a smaller teeth mark for a vole or something. How do we stop them? Well, so many tests have been done on all types of repellents, chemicals, things like that, and none of them are very inclusive or effective. The best thing is exclusion or trapping. There is no toxicant or poison, so we're pretty much stopping at exclusion and trapping, and then once we trap, we can have them removed and euthanized. You cannot translocate, that's against our regulations here in Nebraska, so if you trap one, bring it to the Humane Society and have it properly euthanized. Now, how do we prevent them? The best thing is 1/4 inch mesh. because that'll stop the little ones and the big ones. You can almost go up to 1/2-inch mesh if you want to. That should be about 2 foot high and go into the ground about 2 inches. You don't need to go very deep in the ground because rabbits don't dig very deep. They just dig a form to have their young or a small form to get underneath something. So one thing you can make sure is that your fencing is inclusive around the complete garden. If you're protecting trees, you have to use some kind of protection to stop them from girdling the tree. During the summer, you only need to have that come up about 2 foot. In the winter, you may have it come up about 3 foot in the tree because the snow may be higher. Now, if you want to trap them, the best type is what we call cage trap. The 2-entry cage trap. It's very difficult to catch them by baiting them in the summer. So what you're going to do is find out where they're hiding during the day because they're nocturnal. And you're going to set up a trap that has 2 doors. You're going to have the doors, both doors open, and put it where you know they're going to run in and out at night. They'll run out of their hiding place, whether that's under a deck, under a shed, and get caught in the trap. Again, it is against regulations and non-humane to translocate rabbits. It'll be a slow, agonizing death for the rabbit, and you're giving the problem and diseases to somebody else's yard. So they must be not translocated and dealt with properly.
Trapping rabbits is an option, as Dennis said, but it can be really difficult to succeed when they have plenty of food around, and it's usually your best landscape plants. So a sturdy rabbit-proof fence is really what you want to do with those guys. Okay, Jim, picture number 2. This is really a cool picture, and it's really kind of creepy. It's an asparagus shoot from York that has little tiny black horns sticking out of it. They've never seen those before. What is it?
Natural spice.
Heck.
I think it'd be a pretty bitter spice. Those are the eggs from the asparagus beetle. And so it would be important if you're continuing to harvest the spears when you cut them back or whatever to cover it up. Well, actually what I do is rake away everything you could around the base so you're sure you don't have any more beetles hovering around there or crawling around there. So the beetles are colorful, the larvae are kind of a grayish slug-looking thing with legs. But if you clear that all out and then you cover them, at least you can get a little bit more harvest without having those eggs on there because they are glued on there and it is hard to pull them off. So try that as an angle, but you certainly can't spray, not with the short season we have yet to eat.
Are they bitter if you just ate the asparagus?
Oh yeah, they are bitter, but I don't think it would be a flavor or whatever that you could get accustomed to.
Oh.
One of those.
So it's strong. It's a strong. Wow.
All righty. Okay, Bill. A couple different people have sent this question in, and I know we have a nice patch of this outside our building. They want to know what this weed is that has a square stem, and it's rough, and it's very sticky.
That is...
Bed straw.
I'm sorry. It's bed straw. It's a annual weed. It does have an angular stem, and it's something that you'd want to pull. Mowing it's not going to be an option. It's going to tolerate 2 or 3 inch mowing height, so you can't just mow it if it's in your lawn or something. There are some herbicide controls. They're not great, and so the best thing to do is to pull it and get rid of it before it goes to flower. It is an annual, summer annual. So.
Seems pretty easy to pull too.
It's easy to pull, but once it's established, it is persistent.
Yes.
It will come back. You'll think it's a perennial because it will return year after year after year, even though you've done a pretty good job pulling it and using pre-emerge. So it is easy to get rid of by pulling, very easy.
Yeah, I think if you're ever doing a pre-emerge, I think you have to look at something like Gallery or something, right?
Right.
So it's a specialty product if you have it really bad. So.
All right, and I do recall the farmers having a bed straw fight on air one year, and no, you don't do that.
You could turn any piece of clothing into a ghillie suit with it if you're
Yeah, that's right. That's
You
right.
really could. All right, Lauren, this is an Iowa viewer with strawberries with issues. She says the variety is Clancy, a raised bed 2014. Last year they were so diseased she didn't eat any. She started a spray regime. There's still a concern, and I think there's some blackened stems going on, right there, and some of that kind of stuff.
There's a few different things here. One, I noticed it's kind of in the corner of a house, so there's not a lot of air circulation, and these fungal diseases that you're dealing with in a situation. really going to be favored by that. So just a few general cultural practices that I'd recommend here is make sure you're not overhead irrigating. If you have a soaker hose in there, that's ideal. If you don't, I would recommend installing a soaker hose. Try to remove that leaf litter in future years if you can. Even mowing it, it's up in a bed, it's going to be hard to mow it off, but do something to try to get some of the leaf material to break down, because that's where that's going to come and continue to develop. And so if you can do that, that's going to help a lot. That's also going to help if you're having other diseases, and if you're having in that corner like that, you're probably having some botrytis and soft fruit rots and other things. So if you can do that, and then maybe put a straw mulch down around the plants as they're coming up to try to keep that litter, under there, that's going to help you out a lot. And that would be my first recommendation on that. I hate to really recommend a lot of fungicide sprays for strawberries because typically it's not warranted if you go through those cultural practices and you get some air circulation.
All right, thanks, Lauren. All right, Jeff, this is a viewer in Sarpy County. He thinks he has a Sergeant crabapple, and it looks like a grafted smaller form, dead branches coming out of the winter. He wonders about the health and the longevity of the tree. What should he do here?
I think he should go to the nursery this weekend and pick out a new tree. Unfortunately, I think this tree is obviously the top is dead out of it, so there's really not probably enough left to make that a good viable landscape tree for you. And then I think look at some of your cultural practices, just like Lauren is saying. We want to make sure we have a good soil there that we're planting into. Rock is not a great with all the concrete and everything there, and it looks like they have a nice landscape. Maybe look at an organic mulch there in that area as well to help with that with your new tree as you bring it in.
All right, thanks. And I do think there are some issues with that grafted form of Sergeant crabapple. It doesn't seem to want to stay on a stick.
Sure,
So.
right.
Well, we have had our fair share of rain and hail in the last few days. We did get a chance to get a few things in the ground before the deluge, and our rain chain worked like a charm. Let's take a minute to hear from Terry James about what else is going on in our garden for this week.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we were dodging some rain. So far this week, I think we're hitting about 6 inches of rain here on campus. So our soils are very wet. We did get a few of our cool crop season plants in, so we have some kale and some cabbage and some of those kind of cool crop lettuces that we are seeing in the ground right now. So we actually were able to get a little bit in. We did harden them off, remember, before we actually put them out in the ground out of our greenhouse. So those are ready to go, and we hope that we see some sun and they'll start growing a little bit more. We are going to be very cautious with our soil right now, so not a lot of planting. We will make sure that we stay on all of the paths so that we don't compress any of this really wet soil. So we may be not doing a lot for the next couple days, but we can get into our raised beds and work in those. So as you can see, we have a lot of lettuces coming up. Our peas are looking really good in our raised bed. They're really starting to climb up that little trellis. And our rain chain has really worked well. We were really excited to see it working. We did go in and make sure that it didn't hold water for very long. We did time it, and it was really pretty much drained out within 24 hours.
As Terry said, it's still too wet to get the rest of those flowers and vegetables planted, but it really is great to see that rain chain working. And Jeff, thank you again for rolling down that curb and not rolling it down so far that we got all of that water. That would have been in Kime Hall.
Yeah.
Okay, from North Platte, Jim, aphids in the greenhouse. Many, many, many. Aphids in the greenhouse.
Is this would be like a commercial greenhouse maybe, or at least enough of a greenhouse to have multiple plants, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to know what kinds of plants would be in that greenhouse, but generally speaking, if you have acquired plants, from some other source, they might already come provisioned with like potato aphids or I'm trying to remember the other, melon aphids, and then also green peach aphid. And they have a history of building up resistance in greenhouse situations to the normal kinds of pesticides. If you have a whole arrangement of different kinds of plants, you're going to have to take a look at what would be allowed for those particular plants, because of whatever pesticide you may use, even if we're talking insecticidal soaps or horticultural oil sprays, you need to know what would it be applicable to and what it wouldn't be. And so those are good materials to apply to kill aphids, because you're just about physically going to have to do it by smothering or soapy action. But again, pay attention to what kinds of plants you're spraying it to, and spray liberally to get good coverage too.
All right, thanks, Jim. Okay, Bill from Omaha, a question about whether hydro mulch, we think, for turf is a good product.
Yeah, we use hydromulch a lot in commercial golf situations, especially if you have an area that's difficult to access and seed, like a hillside. The hydromulch can help bind to the soil, keep the seed there. You kind of spray it on with pretty much a big, fire hose situation. So it can work. It's just generally you have to have a professional do it because you need some specialized equipment. But if someone's speccing that out, if it's done properly, it should be very effective.
All right, thanks, Bill. Lauren, we get a lot of yellow clematis questions this time of year, bright yellow, and we're not talking flowers. Is that pathology or is that hunger?
It could be. Clematis is really hard to troubleshoot. It seems like a lot of times they're positioned wrong in the landscape. There can be issues with soil pH. There can be issues with all kinds of things. If it is a disease, many times it will kind of burn or fire from the bottom up. They are sensitive to some of our fungal diseases, particularly, we'll get some fusarium wilts and things on them. So if you're seeing it burning on the bottom and losing leaves, that could be, a fungal disease that it can be, eventually it'll kill the plant most of the time. If you're seeing just chlorotic spots, I jump over and ask Jeff if there's some things, soil-wise and nutrient-wise that maybe it needs a little bit of help.
Yeah, well, possibly. I guess with our high pH soils, that might be an issue, so you may want to look at some of that. And I think, historically, us clematis growers, there's that kind of keep the roots shaded and the top sunny. Mm-hmm. And if you've done a little bit too much of that, kind of what you're saying, I can see where we start having disease issues because people are really trying to protect that, over mulch it, perhaps grow things fronting the clematis that are reducing air circulation. So just kind of what you've described.
All right, thanks, guys. Jeff, a question about a tree on an acreage southwest of Gretna, so kind of out there.
Okay.
They want something that is pretty purple or light purple flowers in the spring, and no, they don't want redbud.
Well, if they don't want redbud, so it sounds like, crab apples are probably an easy choice. There are a ginormous amount of crab apples to select from. Mm-hmm. And probably the biggest thing is making sure that you get one that's disease resistant, which most of the nurseries, I would be surprised if they carry anything that's going to be susceptible to some of the problems that Lauren will help us with. But I think that's one thing that would be a great choice. And then I think probably, again, one of the issues we have with crabs is suckering, so it's important that once we get that, we don't over prune that crab. We're not trying to force it into a particular shape. Let it do its thing, and that'll help with the suckering issues.
Thanks for staying with us here on Backyard Farmer. Later on in the program, we'll see some great selections of sedges that are prominently featured in our rain chain. You can still phone in your questions, dial 1-800-676-5446. While you're doing that, we'll start the lightning round in here, no more outside. Okay, Jeff, ready?
Yes.
We have a quilter who wants to know whether she can use her 100% cotton scraps in the landscape or in her compost pile so the birds can have them for nesting.
I suppose she could. Sure, why not? Yeah. The one thing you want to be careful is if it's scraps, I'd worry about matting and that sort of thing. But yeah, go for it.
All right. Should this viewer buy 5-foot-tall arborvitae for a screen instead of the smaller 3-foot ones? Which ones are going to establish better?
Probably the question is the size of the pot and what the roots look like. I would ask to pull them out and make sure that we don't have just a total mass of roots there. So that's the whole thing. If the 5-foot ones have a very large pod and they're nicely rooted, you see nice white shiny roots on the outside, they should be fine.
All right. We have a viewer who had drift from a soybean field and now has brown spots all over his produce. Can he eat the produce?
I wouldn't. No. Yeah, I would worry about it. I'm sure some sort of herbicide that did it, so no.
Okay, can spirea, the bridal wreath types, be pruned now?
If it's done flowering, you could do some, yeah, absolutely.
All right, nice job.
That's 4. You got the advantage, Lauren.
You got the advantage
Or
so
see
far.
what I can do. Turkey
Okay,
pastrami night, I'm ready to go.
in this lovely weather, powdery mildew on phlox plants.
Lots of it.
Can it be treated or should it?
It could be.
With? Nice try.
Actually, overhead water works well. You can treat it. There are even sulfur products if you want to go organic.
All right, lots of rust on the penstemons, the rots and spots. Anything to do about that?
With rust on penstemon, it's going to cycle. I don't think I would protect that. I wouldn't do anything with it.
Okay, leaves are turning gray, icky, and blackish on the sycamores and then dropping off.
It's anthracnose. It's really too late to treat. Next year, come in at bud stage.
Okay, heirloom tomatoes, are they more or less susceptible to tomato mosaic viruses than the regular old guys?
Not mosaic. They're more susceptible to many of the foliar diseases, but most of our tomatoes would get any of our viruses for the most part. I would rogue it out.
Okay, we have a viewer who sent us pictures of orange spots on her horse chestnut leaves. What's
That's
that?
rust. It cycles with one of our native grasses in the landscape. Don't treat it.
All right.
That's 5, Lauren.
It's rust
You were
night.
kind of slow reading
Yeah.
questions, or I would have went
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Blame me. Okay, you
More
ready for
coffee.
turf?
Sure.
Okay. This lawn is putting up seed stalks. How do you harvest and replant that seed?
I wouldn't try to harvest that seed. It's time of the year. A lot of times you have to treat things. Don't do it. It's probably not going to work.
Okay. A neighbor sprayed his weeds, and then the annuals in this viewer's lawn or yard are turning yellow.
Mm-hmm.
Where does he send a sample to have it tested for weed killer?
I don't know.
Perfect.
Okay.
Should you spray the clover in your lawn or let the bees play?
Let the bees play. You wouldn't spray it now anyways. There's no bees, so.
All right. Had a granular crabgrass preventer / fertilizer left over. How long can it be stored?
I can store it for a while. Just keep it dry. Yeah, I mean, I can store it for a year as long as it's in a sealed bag.
Okay, is it too late to overseed the lawn?
It's getting late, but you can still seed now,
All right.
just at the end of it.
What type of lawn can be planted under maples and oaks?
I would try tall fescue. If that doesn't work, nothing.
Perfect.
Last answer really didn't count. It was after the bell.
Well, one answer didn't count because I didn't know the answer.
And the competition begins.
I'm going to go for 7 now, so we got a nice sequence there. 4,
Yours
5,
are
6,
hard
7.
tonight.
Oh, boy.
So prediction is the temperatures are going to drop into the 30s tomorrow night. What's the effect going to be on our poor pollinating insects?
They'll go to coverage or protected areas, and they'll be fine.
Okay. Do those ash flower galls that are so awful, do they delay leafing out of the ash trees?
There's a strong correlation this year, I noticed, but I don't really know. But it'd be something worth checking into.
Okay. Systemic tree root drenches for insects, will they actually translocate through the tree into the fruit or the seeds and then hurt the critters and the insects that eat
They
them?
potentially can. It depends upon the dosage and everything. So that's something to be very careful to follow the label directions.
Okay, we had somebody say their hollyhocks have large yellow eggs on them.
Okay.
Right now, is that
I'm thinking more that might be a hollyhock rust or something like that, which has protrusions.
okay? So not an insect.
Not an insect, no. All we have is hollyhock weevil. That's our public enemy number 1.
Okay, and so where can you buy those traps that you trap Japanese beetles in?
Usually most farm supplies, garden centers, they're widely available. And since we're in the Japanese beetle area now, I'm sure they're widely available at most home centers, et cetera. Yep.
Perfect. Nice job,
Did
gentlemen.
we do 4, 5, 6, 7, or just 4, 5, 6, 6?
You all did fine. You all
Okay,
get a
thank
blue
you.
ribbon.
Thank you.
No, it's none of that around here. You win or you lose.
Okay, and so Jeff is going to win because he has Gladys's gifts.
I have Gladys's flowers this week. So the first one we're going to look at is this white one here on the outside, and that's white fringe tree. And so it does very well in the eastern part of the state. I'm guessing probably as we go west it would do less well. But it's a nice understory tree. It doesn't get real large, maybe about 10 foot tall ultimately, and about that wide. So, but it's very pretty. It's something a little different. You know, we're kind of in the white flower time of year where a lot of things are flowering white. So this is one of those that's a little unusual. Then with the large leaves, that's Jack in the Pulpit. And so this is a nice shade perennial. Again, this is a tuber, so you want to be careful. She recommends making sure it doesn't ever dry out. So you don't want to put it someplace that's a dry shade. So I know sometimes Kim will talk about what to plant under a tree, and many times under trees will be a drier shade with all those roots. So that's something to kind of think about. Has nice red berries in the fall, gets 6 to 24 inches tall. So
And is native.
Right.
In the woods.
Right.
Yeah. And that fringe tree is fragrant still or not?
I'm not really smelling anything, but I'm sitting next to
Lauren. And on that note, thank you to Gladys for bringing in her beauty as always. Okay, Jim, you get the next picture question. Speaking of ash flower mite gall and those kinds of things, this is in Bellevue, and it's an insect that is invading the ash. There is the tree itself, and then there's the culprit. And I know the question is that...
Yeah, is that emerald ash
Right.
borer? And remember, emerald ash borer is a metallic green. Actually, it's bullet-shaped. You know, it's really closely related, but not in the same family. But a metallic green color, about a ½ inch long, very narrow body. But we have not seen emerald ash borer yet. And so we're always glad that everyone is out looking in the landscape and already anticipating it. And we're very thankful we still don't have it. There's probably other issues with that tree, late foliation, or ashes have been under a lot of stress over the last few years, and some of them are just naturally succumbing to even the natural borers that we have, as well as stresses.
All right, thanks, Jim. Okay, you have A and B here, Bill,
Okay.
that are weeds. And the first is a patch of grass in the asparagus patch. Sprayed it last year with glyphosate, came back bigger. Hoed it, came back, and it's around Tecumseh. And the second picture is also in an iris bed. This is Campbell, Nebraska. They used grass beater on it or something similar, and same thing, no results.
Yeah, it's because, as you hinted at, it is not a grass. That is a sedge. It's a yellow nut sedge, and it is a perennial weed. You'll notice if you grab the stem and you run it through your fingers, the grass will be round, so it will roll nice and smoothly, or it's folded, so you'll feel like a piece of paper flipping back and forth. You do this, it's going to be triangular, you'll feel that. And so I wouldn't pull it. If you try to pull it, there's little nutlets in the ground. It's going to come back stronger and stronger and stronger. If it's in the grassy situation, you want to try to mow the grass as high as possible. It's generally found in wetter locations, but it can also be found in dry locations. And so all the grass herbicides, the other herbicides aren't going to control this. The pre-emergence won't control this because the nutlets are probably in the ground already. And you're really going to have to depend on some kind of a sedge killer to take care of it. So it can be an issue. But some people embrace it because if they can't grow grass there, then nut sedge can be something that exists. So.
Or other sedges, which we'll talk about later.
There you go, lead in.
We have had pretty good luck pulling ours, but we pull it like every minute.
Yeah, I mean, you have to pull it right away. You can't slow it. Once
every
it's
minute.
established, and you start pulling it, it's just going to make it mad and make it come back harder.
Exactly. All right, Lauren, you have a couple of rose issues. What's the white powder on the roses? North Platte viewer, and what in the world is going on with one called Seven Sisters, which is an old rambler? Is it
Pretty white too.
It's pretty white, isn't it? Wondering. This one says, and this is McCook, that it's a little bit sticky, and she's also wondering if it's like a leaf hopper thing, or is this powdery mildew? Are we seeing powdery mildew on both of these probably, or?
If it's sticky, it's not powdery mildew. It may go to Jim's camp, but both of them in appearance look like powdery mildew to me. And with that, overcast conditions, if it's in the shade, all these things really favor powdery mildew. Again, with our foliar fungal diseases in general, we say avoid overhead irrigation, but powdery mildew is one that doesn't like overhead irrigation. So you can actually put a hose on it more frequently will help. And then a lot of your rose fungicides would be active against powdery mildew. So just, if you have a product, just check and see if it has that on the label. Many of them would have longer residual activity, so something with, even a mycobutanil or these types of things you could look at as using.
Roses do get leafhopper issues, but that tends to be more uniform across the plant, whereas with leafhoppers, it would be those terminals that are the succulent growth. And so you'll have little cottony or waxy areas of the plant, but not uniformly distributed.
Over the whole thing. All right, thanks, guys. Jeff, this is an Alma, Nebraska viewer with a honey locust, and a lot of the smallest branches way out didn't have any foliage, and then they've got what they're calling sprouts of some sort on the main limbs. And the question is, do they take all those off? How do they prune something like this?
Well, it's a big tree, so you're probably going to end up having to hire someone to come in to do that. And ideally, you're hiring a Nebraska certified arborist or an international certified arborist to come in and do that work for you. My thought looking at this, obviously, we want to go in and take any dead out. I think they commented they had some dead at the top of the tree or something like that. There's some stubs, large stubs there, so some pruning or something's happened where some larger branches have come out of that. So we want to take all that stuff out of it first. There is a lot of that suckering kind of water sprouts going along the big stems. And again, with any of these things, heavy pruning or damage is encouraging that sort of response by the tree. So it's going to be a staged thing. We're going to go in and take out the dead, take out those stubs, and then come back maybe in a year and look at starting to take out some of the water sprouts kind of systematically over time.
And you put some little red slashes in there, I think, so that'll show up on air.
Okay, all right.
That's good. So we'll know.
Yeah, and that was just kind of an example of some things
Right.
that, I thought if that was my tree, what I would be looking at initially.
All right, and we trust your judgment.
Oh, great, thanks.
Well, we've talked a lot about how our rain chain in the Backyard Farmer Garden area has been working overtime with all of our recent rains. A few of our favorite plants featured there are sedges. They're becoming increasingly popular in landscapes and gardens, and right now we're going to show you a few of those selections. Our rain chain on East Campus is a great example of how sedges can actually be used in a great and beneficial way in locations where perhaps you can't get real turf established. You have terrible soil, you have wet soil, you have dry shade. We have a lot of different sedges, especially ones that are native to the Plain States, that can be useful in these environments. Sedges are distinguished from grasses first by their triangular leaf cross section. We use the terminology sedges have edges, which is pretty true for most of them. They also can be either clump formers or they can form a little bit of a sod, travel rhizomatously, or travel by seed. One of the beautiful things about many of them is they emerge early in the spring. They will withstand standing water depending on which ones you select. And then they have these great and very interesting, unique flowers followed by interesting seed heads. This is Longbeak Sedge, which forms this beautiful, tall, gently swaying mass of stems and grasses. These have actually already gone into seed, so you're seeing these long, sort of narrow, dangling seed heads standing on this sedge, and this will be ornamental during the entire growing season. 3 or 4 of the other sedges that are really useful and ornamental in the landscape include Gray's sedge, which is also a clump former with broader blades and has these really oddball, interesting seeds that look a little bit like a giant sand burr, like one of those mace things that used to be used in medieval times to smack people in the head. We also have palm sedge. Palm sedge is one of the ones that can become pretty aggressive and spread pretty rapidly, which is great in conditions where you really need to hold the soil. And then Pennsylvania sedge, or Pennsylvanica, which has very fine, tiny little seed heads and flowers and will actually tolerate dry shade. Sedges are becoming more widely available in retail garden centers. If you have a location where you'd like to consider putting in a rain garden, or you have some shaded conditions and you want to give these grass-like textured plants a try, remember that they will also, in some cases, provide evergreen winter interest, as well as certainly do that great job of cleaning water before it goes back down into our aquifers. And as you can see from a design standpoint, even incorporating something like this shrub, which happens to be one of our dogwoods, you get that textural difference between the fine sedges, the more bold leaves of larger perennials or shrubs, Makes for a great landscape combination that really requires very little short of cutting them back when you're finished enjoying them for the winter months. These varieties will thrive along the edges of your rain garden, and there are also other selections that will do just fine in drier conditions. So no matter what you decide to plant, they really are known for their hardiness. They do add texture, especially in places where turf grasses really don't want to grow. Yeah. You do have to be careful about not using the sedge ender on your sedge bed that you want, because then you're not going to have those either.
Yeah.
So be careful on that one. All right, Jim, this is, let's see.
A sedge.
Yeah, there's a beautiful picture of a sedge, and that actually is one called Carrick's Grey Eye. And I talk about that one as being like one of those mace things that medieval people pop people's heads off with. Okay, this is these are eggs on patio furniture and on a fence.
On a fence.
What is that?
Looks like the rail of a fence.
Yeah.
Well, it looks to me like I'm 99.9% sure. That it is a broad-winged katydid. It laid eggs, female laid eggs last autumn. And so I don't know if they're viable or not. They may be still viable, meaning that they will hatch and cute little katydids will come out. But they usually lay eggs that overlap. They're kind of bean-shaped, but a little bit flattened like lentils or something. And then they're in alternating rows, one staggered back and forth on some object, usually on stems in nature, but sometimes on rope and lawn furniture and the like. Yep.
So just kind of watch and see what emerges.
See if it hatches.
Yeah, very cool. All right, Bill, we have a viewer in Omaha who wonders whether this 5'3" plant
it's like Kim Todd height.
It's exactly Kim Todd height. Are they seeds or buds? Is it she wants to know what it is before it flowers or goes to seed, and should it stay or should it go?
It looks like dock, and I'm pretty sure it's a biennial. Tap-rooted plant, so you could try to pull it, but pulling a 5 foot root from 5 foot plant probably difficult. So the best thing to do would just be cut it down. You know it's going to grow back though, because it's got a lot of sugar in that big taproot. So you're just going to have to keep on top of it, but then you want to keep any seed from getting out into your garden. So it's just going to be aggressive. Keep on it. As it grows back, just keep cutting it back, and slowly it will die.
And based on some of the public spaces around here where it has allowed to seed, cut it down now.
Yeah, like roadsides too. Just
very aggressive. Right. Pretty kind of, sort of, but yeah, a garden thug. All right, spruce questions just keep coming, Lauren. This is Lake Manawa area in Iowa. About 10 years ago, it was planted. Lower branches and areas are beginning to die. These are about 3-week-old pictures, this viewer says. Now the tree is putting on its new growth. She's wondering if this is this disease issues, or does that spruce, or is that white fir? It's just a little hard to tell on the needles, but it doesn't really matter probably.
Well, in either case, I couldn't really see injury on needles. It looked like just areas were thinned out, or maybe even branches were dying. So it really made me question if you needed to go back into the tree a little bit and look and see if you had any type of canker, which can be really common on both spruce or fir or any of our trees like that. So I would take a closer look inside there and see. If you see spots on needles and such, then I'd send a sample into a diagnostic lab and get that identified, because many of those needle diseases, or like needle casts and things, can be really difficult to manage, and you really need to know which one it is to do the right timing.
Okay, and then watch that lawnmower around those edges maybe too on that one.
So if it's a canker, would it be like resin globs coming down the main stem?
You tend to see some branches that maybe had a swollen area or a lot of resin or pitch on that branch. So I'd look for branches that look like that, or even some sort of physical injury.
Is it healthy to even have that density of the foliage there toward the base, or does that need to be?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not a problem as long as it's getting enough light. I mean, light's the issue if it's being shaded out. And a lot of times with our evergreens, they tend to kind of self-prune themselves up. So.
Right. Yeah. Okay, you have an interesting question, Jeff. This is why more? They had a volunteer tree. They didn't plant it. They want to know what it is, and there are the flowers, and then the fruit is just very interesting on this particular one. And so what do we think this is? Look at that fruit.
Yeah. Well, it looks like a crabapple to me. And so crab apples, I can tell you we have many crab apples on both campuses, and my folks do a great job of maintaining their soils and their mulch beds. And so little crab apples like to come up, and all babies are cute, whether they're a katydid or a crab apple. So we all like little crab apples because they're kind of cute. So it's not hard to imagine that you have a neighbor or have one in your yard, and it's done that. So enjoy it if you like.
Make jam.
Make jam.
And that great,
that's a
reddish
cool
fruit.
fruit.
That was
Yeah,
kind of
wonderful
cool.
color, rich color.
They got a nice gift from
Yeah.
a bird.
Yeah.
All right, we have a couple of announcements of things going on in the gardening world tonight. The first is the River City Cactus and Succulent Society 31st Annual Show and Sale. This weekend, 9 to 5 at Lauritsen Gardens in Omaha. And I think the second one is Planting Time Always Garden Club Annual Plant and Garden Sale. And this is Carter Lake, Iowa, this Saturday, 10 to 2, with a phone number on the screen. So some other gardening opportunities for our viewers. All right, Jim, Bridgeport viewer planted Yukon Gold potatoes. New shoots have been chewed off. Do you think that is an insect this time of year, or is that one of
My
Dennis's
guess is
rabbits?
probably one of Dennis's rabbits that got away. Too smart to get in that cage, I guess.
Or one of those little ones who tastes everything before they decide
Yes,
nothing is edible.
yes.
All right. Okay, Bill, how do you get annual bluegrass out of a lawn?
Annual bluegrass in a lawn, generally an issue only on short lawns. It doesn't want to grow much more than about 1.5 inches tall. So just by mowing it at about 3 inches, you're really going to reduce that annual bluegrass. You can't chemically spray for it, so you're going to have to, you could cut it out, you can non-selective, but the best thing is just maintain that lawn as high as possible.
All right. Lauren, we have hostas that were really excellent for years from this viewer, and now the plants are coming up with, the outside leaves are dark. They're not saying dark green, but sounds to me if they're saying dark, they don't mean green.
Okay. Well, and there's a couple things. Hostas can get crown and root rot, so if it's the lower leaves and they're coming up and they're kind of firing or doing that burning in the margins, there's a good chance that's what's going on. Unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do with that. I would just kind of watch it for some time, though, and if it doesn't come out of that, I would just replace it with a new, colorful variety.
All right. This is from Crab Orchard, not Crab Apple.
Okay.
And the question is, can he use preen on a bed where he's planted corn?
Well, the big answer is look at the label. I mean, just like Bill talks about being smart about it and reading the labels and knowing what you're using. Preen is labeled for many things. It's a very common pre-emergent for a garden plant, so I would make sure that it's labeled for corn.
All right. Jim, bagworms. Many pulled off all he can reach. Now what?
Well, it's probably the bags that were pulled off.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, they probably haven't even hatched yet. So if there are any remaining, just be observant to signs of their feeding, especially if you have something like a spruce or whatever, where you get some blasting of the needles that look like they're drying out and the tiny little caterpillars are feeding on them. But then you can treat very easily with a number of even non-chemical, insecticides. So just watch it, I guess. Good job in pulling as many off as they could.
Exactly. All right, we're down to under a minute. So, Bill, we talked about a chemical that could kill fescue in bluegrass.
Yeah, there is a chemical out there that can do that. Unfortunately, it's been pulled from the market for cool season lawns because people misidentify their lawn as bluegrass and it's really tall fescue. So I'm kind of reluctant to even say what it is because it's not legal to use in that situation. So sorry.
So, in other words, don't ask.
Yeah, I mean,
You're not going to tell.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell.
All right. Lauren, we have 20 seconds. Are you seeing any rose rosette in the diagnostic clinic this year?
Don't think they've seen it at the diagnostic clinic, but very popular or very common in a lot of landscapes. So if your roses come out distorted, leaves are shoestringed, curling, heavy thorns, rogue it out.